What is the aerial perspective? When we use the aerial perspective, how this affects on our works in watercolors or in other mediums. If it is the first time that you listen about aerial perspective, then this video is for you, because in today's video I will explain you more about the aerial perspective, when it is used, how it is used, and why we need it, and how it appeared, and how it affects our future work. During this video, I will share with you a tutorial on how to create a beautiful landscape, and on this landscape I will explain you how we use the aerial perspective and how to create it in such a way that it will catch up the viewer eye once the work is done. If it is your first time here on my YouTube channel, my name is Alla, I'm a sketch illustrator and watercolorist, and from 2020 I'm an art teacher too. Today I invite you to paint these 3 examples of how to create the aerial perspective with different colors, not only blue. But the first one we will start with blue color. And we will start with cerulean blue, with the lightest blue color that you have on your palette. And we create the idea of some mountains in the background and just paint over the surface that we need, because it is just an example of how we can create the aerial perspective, and it is a simple exercise. I invite you just to play around and play with blue colors that you have. Pay attention that after each layer that I apply, I dry the work with a hair dryer. In this way the color stay dry and it makes the difference in between the layers. As I already mentioned, the aerial perspective in painting, it is a method of creating the illusion of depth or recession by modulating the color to stimulate the changes affected by the atmosphere on the colors. Leonardo da Vinci was first to use the term of aerial perspective, and he wrote that the colors become weaker in proportion to their distance from the person who is looking at them. And only later on it was discovered that the presence in the atmosphere of moisture and of tiny particles of dust and similar material causes a scattering of light as it passes through them, and the degree of scattering being dependent on the wavelength, which corresponds to the color of the light. Because light of short wavelength, blue light, is scattered the most, the colors of all distant dark objects tend toward blue. For example, distant mountains have a bluish cast. Light of long wavelength, red light, is scattered least. Thus, distant bright objects appear redder because some of the blue is scattered into lost from the light by which they are seen. And this is why the first example I tended to apply with the blue color. But later on I will show you that it not only depends on the cool or light or warm shadow, it also depends on how much color we apply. For example, in watercolors we apply less color and more water. In other mediums usually it is used white color for creating this difference in color from the first layer, from the background to up to the viewer eye. We just try to represent that the distant objects appear somewhat lighter than objects of similar tone lying closer at hand. Obviously, in art, especially in painting, aerial perspective or atmospheric perspective refers to the technique of creating the illusion of depth by depicting distant objects as polar, less detailed, and usually bluer than near objects. And as we come closer to the viewer eye, we just make this layer almost black because it is super close, it is dark enough, and I just wanted to create this illusion of different layers. I advise you to subscribe to my channel and follow along the next videos, because I will be sharing more interesting examples where we use the aerial perspective. This is a very simple example that I'm showing now
in this class, and as well the following two examples are very easy ones, are to understand how to use the aerial perspective utilizing only one color. But later on I will show you on the real references how to use it.
I decided to share more examples with you of aerial perspective and how it is seen in other sketches, travel sketches, whatever you will paint. It is really important that we create these blurred effects in the background and as well to make it lighter. Not always we will represent it in a cooler color. In 90% of the times you will have to paint the color in the background in a cooler shade, in a cooler hue. But sometimes it can happen, like for example in these beautiful sunsets, sunrises, the background will be warmer than the front part of the work. This is why it is really important to understand how we manage to paint these works. But you should always know that if in the first plan we paint the works in a warmer color, then in the background it will be cooler, and vice versa. For example, in this travel sketch is included in the course travel sketches, where we will paint different beautiful landscapes, cityscapes, and you will learn different ways of perspective, not only in drawing but also in painting. And you can clearly see that in the background I made the hills and the clouds lighter and cooler in color. For example, in this autumn scene, you can see that almost everything that is in the background I haven't detailed. All the details that I applied are here in front of the viewer eyes. The idea is that we always should catch up the viewer eye in the first plan. And here are other two works that I wanted to share. Look how blue I made this background on the horizontal, and here how many warm colors we see. So it is also important. For example, in this landscape, I used not only cool color but also very light colors in the background and almost recreated this aerial perspective that it is not visible. In this way we create depth to the work, we bring all the important things to the front, and the viewer is happy and understand the dynamics of this work. I'm coming back to this work because a part of the aerial perspective, when we should paint lighter and cooler or reverse in the background at the horizontal line, as well we have to take into account the aerial perspective on the clouds, because all the clouds that we have in front, closer to ours, usually are warmer in color. We can recreate the shape of the clouds, but once it goes to the horizontal line, we see that the clouds are becoming first cooler in color, but the second, the form of the clouds, it is more like a line and not a cloudy part, not something with volume. We usually paint just one line and that's it. Obviously, as it is for this scene where we have in the background the warmer scene, the same happens with the clouds. In case that we have clouds in such a scene where we have a sunset, sunrise and so on, obviously the clouds will be warmer on the horizontal line, and if those come closer to our eyes, those will be cooler.
I just decided to stop the previous example and to share more on real examples, because I wanted you to see the difference how we use the aerial perspective in real works, in real references. And now let's proceed with the second example, where we will paint some evergreen trees, and also we will go from lighter color to a darker color. And we also start from the background, because watercolor is a transparent medium, and we always start from the background and coming up to the front. If it would be another medium, we would proceed differently, but in watercolors we also always go from lighter color to darker color. And meanwhile you are following along the painting with me, I would like to talk more about the different laws of aerial perspective. The first law of aerial perspective says that the objects that are in the foreground are perceived by the observer in detail, and it sees the distant objects in general. For the transfer of the objects to be correct, nearby objects must be drawn in detail. In distant objects, in a generalized way. According to the second law of aerial perspective, objects in the foreground are perceived clearly by the eye, while objects in the distance are indefinitely perceived. And according to the third law of aerial perspective, light objects in the background appear darker and dark objects appear lighter. To correctly show space in painting, light objects should be shaded a little and dark ones should be made lighter. The fourth law of aerial perspective states that objects that are close to the observer have contrasting chiaroscuro and look three-dimensional. And in distant objects, this is practically not visible and we make those almost flat. Another law of the aerial perspective is formulated as, for example, under the cover of haze, distant objects acquire their color and become purple, bluish, or whitish. It depends on which medium you work. For example, in watercolors, we just add more water, as I already mentioned earlier. Instead, in other mediums, we add some white color. And another aerial perspective law states that objects in the foreground are perceived as multicolored, while objects in the distance are approaching monochrome. So you can clearly see that on my last layer I intensify the color and I also add more details into the work, and I add more depth into the trees that I paint in front of me. The thing is that you should have dried every layer, because if not, the colors will start to mix and this illusion of going with different layers will be missed out. In my case, I see that somewhere the paper is drying on its own, somewhere I dry it with a hairdryer to have these details done well. With the aerial perspective, you can create the illusion of space in every drawing, simulating the atmospheric changes that affect how objects are seen from distance. These are obviously invented examples that I can share with you how the aerial perspective works, but in real time you have to understand these manipulations of colors and how light is cast on the illustration, and you also should analyze the reference or the real nature. When the object recedes back into the distance, or which colors you use, how you present the illustration, lighter, cooler, warmer, and so on and so forth. Meanwhile, we are moving with the last examples, the example number 3. This time I decided to represent some sand dunes and to represent how it works on those. As well, I'm not modifying the color, I'm just using the lighter warm color, and then I will go with a deeper strong warm colors up to the front. But in the real references we should see if there is needed any blue color to add on. And meanwhile we are painting the last example and we are almost done with it. I want to check up on everything that it was said previously. So aerial perspective is a method to create recession or the illusion of depth. And it is done by modulating the colors, as when we viewed from a distance, atmosphere affects the colors of the things as changes are stimulated. We have to consider 4 major elements while painting the aerial perspective. When the object is farther away from the observer, then the size of the objects becomes smaller. When the object is moved away from the observer, the details of the object decrease. When the object is moved away from the observer, the tones of the object becomes weaker. When the object moves farther away from the observer, the colors of the objects fade away gradually. And once we keep these elements of aerial perspective in art in our mind, then a layered landscape drawing could be made, and the illusion of distance and depth is created by the graduating colors and tones as you will be building the layers. Now, after this video, you are ready to go on the museums and to check out the famous artists to see how they created the aerial perspective in their works and to enjoy it better. As well, if you are for the first time here, I invite you to watch my previous video about perspective in drawing, because both perspectives should be taken into account once you paint travel sketches, once you paint landscapes, because this will help you to enjoy even more the result of your works and how you did it.
If you enjoyed painting with me this landscape and you understood more about aerial perspective, I invite you to share your works with me. You can share your works on your stories and tag me on with my Instagram, and this way I will see your works. I can give feedback to your work and to tell you where you can improve your masterpiece. And as well, if you like this video, please don't forget to like and share this video with the beloved ones. If you have questions, you can leave in the comments down below. And if you have any questions about the tools, materials that I use during my videos, you can find out the affiliate links down below in my description box and to find out all the materials that I use. If it is your first time that you stop over here, I invite you to watch other videos. I invite you to watch my previous video about the perspective in drawing. It is another important tool to know once you begin with your drawing skills, and it will help you to improve your artistic skills. Thank you for watching, and until the next time, bye!